0815 hours. 16 September 1943. 18,000 feet above Belial Island, Major Gregory Boyington pulls back on the stick. The Corsair climbs. 2,000 horses of Pratt and Whitney radial engine roar behind the firewall. Oil pressure steady at 60 pounds per square inch. Fuel gauge shows 180 gallons remaining. His left hand finds the gun sight switch. Flicks it on. The orange reticle glows against the bulletproof glass. 650 caliber Browning machine guns wait in the wings. 400 rounds in the inboard guns. 375 in the outboard. Boyington checks his mirrors. 26 Corsairs trail behind him in loose formation. Replacement pilots. Too old. Too green. That's what the brass called them back at Espiritu Santo. The mechanics shook their heads when they saw the aircraft assignments. Hand-me-down Corsairs. Patched fuel tanks. Worn tires. The radio crackles. Bandits! 2 o'clock high. Estimate 30. Boyington looks up. 30 Japanese Zeros. Silver specks against blue sky. They're diving now. 15,000 feet. Closing fast. Standard doctrine says stay in formation. Cover your wingman. Follow the leader. Fight the enemy on his terms. Boyington keys the radio. Black Sheep, this is Pappy. Forget the book. If you see a target, shoot it. The Zeros come in fast. Lead aircraft opens fire at 800 yards. Orange tracers streak past Boyington's canopy. Too far. Too eager. Boyington rolls inverted. Pulls the stick into his gut. The Corsair dives. Airspeed climbs. 300 miles per hour. 350. 400. The Zero pilot sees him coming. Tries to turn left. The Zero can turn. It always could. But it can't dive with a Corsair. Boyington centers the orange reticle on the Zero's engine cowling. Range closes to 300 yards. 200. 150. His right thumb finds the trigger. All 6 guns fire at once. The Corsair shudders. Spent brass cascades pass the cockpit. Armor-piercing incendiaries streak toward the Zero at 2,800 feet per second. The first rounds punch through the Zero's aluminum skin just aft of the propeller spinner. The second burst tears into the cockpit. The third ignites the fuel tank. Orange flame blooms beneath the Zero's wing. The aircraft rolls left, spins, falls toward the green jungle of Bougainville, 15,000 feet below. Boyington pulls out of his dive. Blood drains from his head. Vision grays at the edges. He blinks, clears his sight, looks around. His radio erupts with voices. Got one. Tally 2 more. Nice shooting, Pappy. The first test is over. The book was wrong. Speed beats turning. Altitude beats experience. The old men in the hand-me-down fighters just proved it. But 30 more Zeros circle above. And this is only day 1. The squadron landed back at Baracoma with fuel gauges reading empty. Ground crews swarmed the Corsairs before the propellers stopped spinning. Boyington climbed out of his cockpit and walked the flight line. 25 aircraft returned, 1 missing. The math was stark. 11 confirmed kills for 1 loss. The missing pilot was 2nd Lieutenant Robert McClurg. His Corsair had taken cannon fire over Balal. Last anyone saw, he was trailing smoke and heading for the water. Search and rescue would look for him at dawn. They never found him. Word spread fast through the squadron area. The replacement pilots had bloodied the Japanese. The too old commander had proven his tactics worked. But Boyington knew better. One engagement proved nothing. The Japanese would adapt. They always did. Within 48 hours, VMF 214 received new orders. Move forward to Munda Airfield on New Georgia. The captured Japanese strip offered better positioning for strikes against Bougainville. Boyington studied the tactical situation. Munda sat 120 miles southeast of Kahili Airfield. The Japanese maintained 60 fighters there. Intelligence estimated another 40 at Balale. The Corsairs made the hop to Munda on September 18th. The runway stretched 4,000 feet across coral and crushed stone. Japanese construction. American engineering had extended it. Palm trees lined both sides. Bomb craters dotted the landscape beyond the perimeter. Evidence of recent fighting. Boyington called his pilots together that first evening at Munda. 26 men sat on ammunition crates under a canvas tarp. Kerosene lanterns threw shadows across their faces. He laid out his new doctrine in simple terms. Forget Navy fighter tactics. Forget close formation flying. The Corsair was not a dogfighter. The Zero turns better, he told them. It climbs better at low altitude, but it can't dive with us, and it can't take punishment. He pointed to a Corsair parked nearby. That machine weighs 12,000 pounds. The Zero weighs 5,000. Physics wins every time. Lieutenant John Bolt raised his hand. He was 23 years old, fresh from flight school, still learning to shave regularly. What if they jump us from above, Major? Then we climb higher first, Boyington answered. We take altitude, we pick our fights, and we hit them when they least expect it. The new tactics required discipline. The old Navy way emphasized tight formations and mutual support. Stay with your wingman, cover each other, fight as a team. Boyington's approach demanded individual initiative within loose formation structure. Climb to 20,000 feet, spot the enemy below, dive at maximum speed, fire at close range, climb back to altitude. Repeat. Training began immediately. Morning flights focused on altitude work. The Corsairs climbed to 25,000 feet over the Russell Islands. Pilots practiced high-speed dives. They learned to use oxygen systems properly. They memorized engine management at thin air. Afternoon sorties targeted Japanese shipping. Fast cruisers and destroyers ran supplies down the slot every few nights. The Black Sheep practiced skip bombing techniques. Come in low and fast. Drop bombs at masthead height. Let momentum carry the ordnance into the target's hull. By early October, the squadron had settled into routine. Wake at 0500, briefing at 0600, first launch at 0700. 4 sorties per day when weather permitted. Fuel consumption ran 165 gallons per flight. Ammunition expenditure averaged 200 rounds per engagement. The logistics were staggering. Each Corsair burned 200 gallons per hour at combat power. The squadron flew 20 aircraft per mission, 4 missions per day. That meant 16,000 gallons of aviation gasoline daily. Supply ships brought fuel drums from Guadalcanal twice per week. Ground crews worked 18-hour shifts to keep aircraft flying. Maintenance proved the real challenge. The Corsairs were reliable machines. But combat flying in tropical conditions wore them down fast. Salt air corroded electrical connections. Coral dust clogged air filters. High-G maneuvers stressed airframes beyond design limits. Mechanics cannibalized parts from damaged aircraft to keep others operational. Lieutenant Bolt learned these lessons the hard way. On October 2nd, his engine quit during a high-altitude climb. Oil pressure dropped to 0 at 18,000 feet. He had 15 minutes of glide time to reach friendly territory. The mathematics were simple. 15,000 feet of altitude. Glide ratio of 10-to-1. That gave him 30 miles of range. Munda lay 28 miles southwest. Bolt trimmed for best glide speed, 110 miles per hour. He watched his altimeter unwind. 15,000 feet, 10,000, 5,000. The runway appeared ahead, a thin line of coral against green jungle. He touched down with the propeller windmilling. No power, no hydraulics, just momentum and gravity. The Corsair rolled to a stop 50 yards from the end of the runway. Bolt climbed out and kissed the ground. His crew chief found metal fragments in the oil system, combat damage from the previous day's mission. Such incidents taught the squadron valuable lessons about aircraft limitations and pilot endurance. The Corsairs could absorb tremendous punishment, but they were not invincible. Careful pre-flight inspections caught most problems. Emergency procedures saved lives when systems failed. Redundant planning kept missions on schedule when individual aircraft went down. By mid-October, VMF 214 had established a reputation among other Marine units. They flew more sorties than anyone else. They claimed more kills per pilot, and they lost fewer aircraft to operational accidents. Other squadron commanders visited Munda to observe their techniques. The secret lay in Boyington's leadership philosophy. He treated his pilots like professionals rather than schoolboys. He expected initiative, he rewarded results, and he protected his men from higher headquarters interference. When base commanders questioned his unorthodox tactics, Boyington pointed to the scoreboard. 43 confirmed kills in 30 days. The numbers spoke for themselves. But success brought new challenges. Japanese intelligence recognized the threat. Enemy fighters began coordinating their intercepts. Ground-based radar provided early warning of incoming raids. Anti-aircraft batteries concentrated around high-value targets. The easy victories of September gave way to harder fighting in October. The war was changing, and VMF 214 would have to change with it. The radio crackled at dawn on October 17th. Intelligence had spotted 60 Japanese fighters massed at Kahili Airfield on Bougainville. Boyington studied the reconnaissance photos spread across his makeshift desk. Rows of Zeros lined the coral runway. Revetments carved into the jungle held bombers and transports. The enemy was concentrating strength. He called for maximum effort. 24 Corsairs would sweep Kahili at high altitude. The mission objective was simple: destroy everything that flew, draw the enemy into the air where American firepower and tactics held advantage, force them to fight on his terms. The briefing lasted 15 minutes. Weather was clear. Winds from the southeast at 10 knots. Enemy radar would detect them 100 miles out. Japanese fighters would scramble immediately. Time over target estimated at 12 minutes before fuel forced them home. Boyington had a different plan. He intended to taunt the Japanese into the air using their own radio frequency. American intelligence had cracked their communications codes months earlier. He would broadcast insults in English on their tactical frequency, goad them into responding with emotion rather than discipline. Launch came at 0800. 24 Corsairs lifted off from Munda in loose formation. Boyington led the 1st Division. Captain Robert Hansen commanded the 2nd. Lieutenant John Bolt flew wing position in the 3rd Division. Each pilot carried full ammunition. 600 rounds of 50 caliber armor-piercing incendiary. The flight climbed steadily northeast toward Bougainville. 15,000 feet, 18,000, 20,000. The air grew thin. Pilots switched to oxygen. Engine power dropped with altitude but remained adequate. The Corsairs maintained 180 miles per hour indicated airspeed. Kahili appeared ahead at 0915. The airfield sprawled across a plateau inland from the coast. 2 runways intersected at right angles. Aircraft lined both strips. Boyington counted 47 fighters visible on the ground. More hid in revetments carved from coral. He switched to the Japanese tactical frequency. "This is the American Black Sheep Squadron. We are circling your airfield at 20,000 feet. Send up your fighters if you are not afraid." The transmission went out in clear English. Boyington repeated it twice. The response came immediately. Zeros began rolling down both runways. First 2 aircraft, then 4, then 8. Within 5 minutes, 21 Japanese fighters climbed toward the circling Americans. More followed. The enemy was taking the bait. Boyington watched the climbing Zeros through his gun sight. They climbed steeply at 140 miles per hour. Maximum rate of climb for the Zero was 3,000 feet per minute at sea level, but performance degraded rapidly above 15,000 feet. The thin air robbed power from their engines. At 18,000 feet, the Japanese formation leveled off and turned toward the Americans. Boyington counted 28 fighters. They maintained tight formation. Classical Japanese tactics, mutual support, coordinated attacks, precisely what he expected. "Black Sheep, this is Pappy. Here they come. Remember your altitude. Keep your speed up. Hit them hard and climb away." He rolled his Corsair into a diving turn. The formation followed. 24 American fighters dove at maximum speed toward the climbing Japanese. The closing rate was tremendous. Combined speeds exceeded 600 miles per hour. Range closed from 5 miles to 3 to 1 in seconds. The Japanese fighters scattered as the Americans plunged through their formation. No coordinated response. pure survival instinct. Boyington selected a zero climbing directly ahead. He centered the orange reticle on its engine cowling. Range dropped to 400 yards, 300, 200. His thumb found the trigger. All 6 guns fired simultaneously. The Corsair shuddered from recoil. Armor-piercing rounds tore through the Zero's thin aluminum skin. The first burst sparked off the engine cowling. The second punched through the cockpit area. The third ignited fuel vapors in the wing tanks. Orange flame erupted along the Zero's left wing root. The Japanese pilot tried to roll away from the fire. The Zero snap-rolled left and entered an unrecoverable spin. Boyington pulled up sharply and climbed back to altitude. His airspeed indicator read 420 miles per hour. The Zero could not match that performance in a dive. Radio chatter filled his headset. "Got one. Nice shooting. They're running." The engagement had lasted less than 3 minutes. American tactics worked perfectly. High-speed diving attacks, fire at close range, climb back to safety, repeat as fuel allowed. Lieutenant Bolt engaged 2 Zeros attempting to climb after the Americans. He dove from 22,000 feet at maximum speed. The first Zero saw him coming and tried to turn away. Bolt fired a long burst from 300 yards. His rounds walked across the Zero's fuselage from tail to cockpit. The aircraft rolled inverted and dove toward the jungle. The second Zero pilot was more experienced. He pulled into a climbing turn as Bolt approached. The maneuver would work against most fighters. But the Corsair was not most fighters. Bolt maintained his dive angle and fired from directly astern. His rounds entered the Zero's engine compartment. Coolant and oil sprayed across his windscreen as he flashed past the dying aircraft. Captain Hansen led his division against a formation of 6 Zeros, attempting to coordinate their attack. The Japanese pilots flew tight formation. Each protected the others, classic defensive tactics. But they flew too slowly and climbed too gradually. Hansen split his division into 2 elements. He led one pair in a high-speed diving attack from the left. His wingman took the second pair in from the right. The Japanese formation had no answer to simultaneous attacks from different angles. Their tight formation became a liability. Hansen selected the lead Zero and opened fire at 250 yards. His first burst hit the engine. His second burst walked through the cockpit area. The Zero's propeller stopped turning. The aircraft entered a shallow glide toward the ocean 15,000 feet below. His wingman destroyed a second Zero with a deflection shot from the right side. The remaining 4 Japanese fighters scattered in different directions. Their formation discipline collapsed. Individual survival took precedence over unit cohesion. The engagement lasted 12 minutes. American ammunition ran low. Fuel gauges showed reserves approaching minimums for the return flight to Munda. Boyington ordered withdrawal. The Corsairs formed up and headed southeast. Behind them, 20 Japanese aircraft burned on the ground or spun toward Earth, trailing smoke and flame. 0 losses for VMF 214. The score was decisive, but Boyington knew the victory cost more than aircraft. It cost Japanese pilot experience, veteran aviators who could not be replaced. The intelligence value exceeded the tactical results. Radio intercepts revealed Japanese confusion and demoralization. Ground controllers had lost contact with multiple aircraft. Search and rescue efforts found no survivors. The psychological impact on remaining Japanese pilots was severe. Flight time back to Munda was 1 hour 15 minutes. The Corsairs landed with fuel tanks nearly empty. Ground crews immediately began refueling and rearming. Another mission launched that afternoon. The Japanese mounted no significant air response. By evening, the squadron tally reached 73 confirmed air-to-air kills, 54 probables, 147 Japanese aircraft destroyed or damaged, including ground targets. The 84-day tour was approaching its mathematical peak. But mathematical precision mattered less than tactical innovation. The black sheep had proven their point. Age and experience trumped youth and enthusiasm when combined with superior equipment and sound doctrine. The 2-old squadron had found their moment. The Japanese adapted faster than Boyington expected. By late November, intelligence reports showed enemy fighters operating in larger formations, 30 to 40 aircraft instead of 20. They climbed to higher altitudes before engaging. They coordinated attacks with ground-based radar. The easy victories of October became distant memories. Weather turned against the squadron as well. Tropical storms moved through the Solomons every few days. Visibility dropped to zero. Runways flooded. Aircraft sat grounded for days at a time. When missions did launch, pilots faced towering cumulus clouds that reached 40,000 feet. Navigation became guesswork in the endless gray. Fuel consumption increased dramatically. The longer flights to Rabaul area targets required external wing tanks. Each Corsair carried an additional 124 gallons in underwing pods. The extra weight reduced climb performance and maneuverability. Pilots had to jettison the tanks before engaging enemy fighters, but that shortened their combat radius. Maintenance problems multiplied. Salt air corroded everything. Hydraulic seals failed in the tropical heat. Engine oil temperatures ran 20 degrees higher than normal. Cylinder head cracking became common. The squadron's operational aircraft count dropped from 24 to 18 to 15 on any given day. Boyington pushed his pilots harder to maintain mission tempo. 4 sorties per day became the norm when weather permitted. Pilots flew with minor injuries that would have grounded them in peacetime. Exhaustion showed in their faces. Reaction time slowed. Judgment deteriorated. The enemy noticed. Japanese fighters began pressing attacks more aggressively. They followed damaged American aircraft toward friendly territory. They coordinated with submarines positioned along likely flight paths. Search and rescue became a combat operation rather than a routine pickup. On December 15th, Lieutenant Bill Case took cannon fire during a sweep over Bougainville. His Corsair lost hydraulic pressure and oil. The engine began running rough at reduced power. Case turned southeast toward Munda, but his altitude bled away steadily. The engine was dying. He made it within 30 miles of base before the Pratt & Whitney seized completely. The propeller windmilled to a stop. Case trimmed for best glide and aimed for a small island offshore from Munda. He had perhaps 5 minutes of glide time remaining. The Corsair touched down on a coral beach at 100 miles per hour. It bounced twice and slid sideways into shallow water. Case climbed out with a broken wrist and mild concussion. A Navy patrol boat retrieved him 2 hours later. The aircraft was a total loss. Salvage crews stripped usable parts and left the airframe on the beach. Such incidents occurred with increasing frequency as December progressed. Aircraft losses mounted. Pilot fatigue accumulated. The squadron's effectiveness declined, but Boyington refused to reduce operational tempo. The war would not wait for rest and recovery. Intelligence reports indicated major Japanese fleet movements toward Rabaul. Admiral Yamamoto was concentrating naval, aviation for a decisive counteroffensive. 300 enemy aircraft were assembling at airfields throughout New Britain and New Ireland. The largest aerial battle of the Pacific War was approaching. VMF 214 received orders to participate in a maximum effort sweep over St. George's Channel on January 3, 1944. 75 American fighters would engage whatever the Japanese sent up. The mission profile called for high-altitude fighter sweeps, followed by dive bombing attacks on shipping in Simpson Harbor. Boyington studied the intelligence briefings with growing concern. Japanese radar coverage was now complete around Rabaul. Enemy fighters would have 30 minutes warning of incoming raids. They could climb to intercepting altitude and position themselves advantageously. The element of surprise was gone. Weather forecasts predicted scattered thunderstorms over the target area. Cloud cover at 8,000 to 12,000 feet. Visibility reduced to 5 miles in rain showers. Conditions favored the defenders who knew local terrain and could use clouds for concealment. The odds had shifted against the Americans. But orders were orders. VMF 214 would launch 18 Corsairs at dawn. Maximum fuel load, full ammunition, external wing tanks for extended range. Combat air patrol over the fleet was no longer sufficient. The squadron would hunt enemy fighters over their home territory. Boyington gathered his pilots for final briefing at 0500 on January 3rd. 18 men sat on ammunition crates in the pre-dawn darkness. Kerosene lanterns cast flickering shadows across tired faces. Some had flown continuously for 4 months. Others were replacement pilots with less than 50 hours combat experience. "The Japanese are waiting for us," he told them. "They know we're coming. They'll have altitude advantage and numerical superiority. Weather will be marginal. Fuel will be tight." He paused and looked at each pilot individually. "But we've beaten them before. We'll beat them again." Launch came at 0630. 18 Corsairs lifted off from Vela La Vela in loose formation. The runway stretched 3,000 feet across crushed coral. Palm trees lined both sides. Morning mist drifted across the water beyond the reef. The flight climbed northwest toward Rabaul at maximum continuous power. Fuel flow ran 90 gallons per hour per aircraft. Combat radius was 450 miles with external tanks. Time over target would be limited to 20 minutes before fuel forced them home. Weather deteriorated as they approached enemy territory. Scattered cumulus clouds built to towering heights. Rain squalls reduced visibility to 2 miles. Lightning flickered in the distance. Radio reception became intermittent due to atmospheric interference. At 0815, radar controllers vectored them toward a large formation of enemy fighters, climbing southeast from Rabaul. Initial count estimated 40 Japanese aircraft, mix of Zeros and newer Kawanishi fighters, all climbing to intercept altitude. Boyington led his formation through a layer of broken clouds at 15,000 feet. The enemy formation appeared ahead and slightly above. They were climbing in perfect V formations. Classical Japanese tactics, mutual support, coordinated attacks, precisely disciplined. But something was different. The Japanese fighters seemed more aggressive. They pressed their attacks closer. They followed damaged American aircraft farther from base. Individual pilots took greater risks. Desperation was replacing discipline. The engagement began at 0820 over St. George's Channel. 18 American Corsairs dove into 40 Japanese fighters. The closing rate exceeded 600 miles per hour. Range collapsed from 5 miles to contact in 30 seconds. Radio discipline vanished in the chaos of individual combat. Boyington selected a climbing Zero and opened fire at 300 yards. His first burst missed ahead of the target. The Japanese pilot pulled into a climbing turn and reversed direction. Experienced pilot. He knew Corsair tactics and had prepared countermeasures. The Zero climbed steeply at maximum power. Its pilot intended to force a turning fight at low airspeed where Japanese aircraft held advantage. Boyington followed in a climbing spiral. His Corsair maintained superior speed, but lost maneuverability in the thin air above 20,000 feet. At 22,000 feet, the Zero pilot made his mistake. He leveled off and turned left to line up a deflection shot. The maneuver exposed his aircraft to attack from below. Boyington dropped his nose and fired a long burst from 400 yards. Armor-piercing rounds walked across the Zero's fuselage from engine to tail. The Japanese aircraft rolled inverted and entered a flat spin. No recovery attempt. The pilot was either dead or unconscious. Boyington watched it fall toward the green jungle of New Britain 8 miles below. His fuel gauge showed 120 gallons remaining. Time to head home. He keyed the radio to order withdrawal. Static filled his headset. Atmospheric interference from the thunderstorms had severed communications. Individual pilots were fighting alone without coordination or mutual support. The formation discipline that made VMF 214 effective had broken down. Boyington looked around for other American aircraft. He saw 2 Corsairs pursuing Zeros toward the northeast. 3 more engaged a large formation of enemy fighters over Simpson Harbor. The rest had scattered in different directions. The mission was fragmenting into individual combats. He turned southeast toward home base, but his engine began running rough. Oil pressure dropped to 40 pounds per square inch. Cylinder head temperature climbed into the red zone. Combat damage or mechanical failure. Either way, his Corsair was dying. The engine seized at 18,000 feet over St. George's Channel. The propeller stopped turning. Boyington trimmed for best glide and aimed for the water. He had perhaps 10 minutes before ditching, No rescue aircraft were airborne. The waters below held enemy submarines. He would not make it home. The Corsair hit the water at 90 miles per hour. Boyington had jettisoned the canopy and loosened his harness during the glide down. The impact drove him forward against the instrument panel. Salt water flooded the cockpit instantly. The aircraft sank nose first in 12 seconds. He surfaced 20 yards from the sinking fighter. Blood ran from a cut on his forehead. His left shoulder ached from the impact, but he was alive and conscious. The Mae West life jacket kept him afloat in the choppy seas of St. George's Channel. The water temperature was 82 degrees, warm enough to prevent hypothermia. But the channel teemed with sharks, and Japanese submarines patrolled these waters regularly. Boyington had perhaps an hour before enemy vessels arrived to investigate the crash site. He activated the emergency radio beacon attached to his life jacket. The device transmitted on the international distress frequency for exactly 90 seconds. Then the battery died. No response came from American rescue aircraft. Either they were too far away or the signal was too weak. Boyington began swimming southeast toward the Russell Islands. The distance was 40 miles. Swimming speed in combat gear averaged 1 mile per hour in calm seas. These waters were not calm. Swells ran 3 to 4 feet. Whitecaps broke constantly. Progress would be measured in yards rather than miles. A Japanese submarine surfaced 600 yards away at 11:15. The I-class boat displaced 2,000 tons and carried a crew of 94. Its diesel engines pushed it at 20 knots on the surface. Boyington could not outswim it. He could not hide from it. He could only wait. The submarine approached slowly. Lookouts scanned the water through binoculars. They had seen the aircraft crash and were investigating for survivors. Boyington floated motionless and hoped they would miss him among the waves and debris. They spotted him at 50 yards. The submarine maneuvered alongside. Japanese sailors threw a line over the side. Boyington had no choice but to grab it. They hauled him aboard like a caught fish. His war was over. The submarine captain spoke excellent English. He questioned Boyington about American aircraft and tactics, squadron strength, base locations, mission profiles. Boyington gave his name, rank, and serial number, nothing else. The Geneva Convention protected prisoners of war from enhanced interrogation. He spent 20 months in Japanese captivity, prison camps in Japan, interrogation centers, labor details, rice and fish twice daily, dysentery, malaria, constant hunger. Many prisoners did not survive. Boyington endured through stubborn determination and careful rationing of his physical strength. Meanwhile, VMF 214 fought on without him. Captain Robert Hansen assumed temporary command. The squadron completed its 84-day tour on January 8, 1944. Final tally showed 97 confirmed air-to-air kills, 203 Japanese aircraft destroyed or damaged, including ground targets. The numbers told the story of tactical innovation under pressure. Replacement pilots had outperformed elite squadrons. Unorthodox doctrine had defeated established enemy tactics. Speed and altitude had trumped maneuverability and experience. The too-old squadron had proven age brought wisdom, but the cost was severe. 8 pilots killed in action, 12 aircraft lost to enemy fire, 4 more destroyed in operational accidents. The replacement rate reached 50%. Victory came at the price of blood and aluminum. Individual statistics revealed the human dimension behind aggregate numbers. Lieutenant John Bolt scored 6 confirmed kills and became an ace. Captain Robert Hansen tallied 25 victories before his death in action. Major Gregory Boyington added 22 kills to his previous Flying Tiger score for a total of 28. The tactical lessons learned at VMF 214 spread throughout marine aviation. High-altitude climbing followed by high-speed diving attacks became standard doctrine. Formation discipline gave way to individual initiative within loose tactical frameworks. The Corsair's performance envelope was finally matched to appropriate employment methods. Aircraft production supported the new tactics. Chance Vought delivered over 12,000 Corsairs during the war. Each mounted 650 caliber machine guns with 2,400 rounds total ammunition. Top speed exceeded 425 miles per hour in level flight. Service ceiling reached 36,900 feet. The industrial capacity behind these numbers dwarfed Japanese production. American factories produced 100,000 military aircraft in 1944 alone. Pilot training programs graduated 8,000 aviators monthly. Fuel production exceeded all consumption requirements. The logistics tail supported aggressive forward deployment. Japanese forces could not match this material advantage. Their aircraft production peaked at 28,000 units annually. Pilot training was shortened to meet immediate needs. Aviation gasoline became critically short by late 1944. Quality declined as experienced workers were drafted for combat service. The strategic situation shifted decisively after January 1944. American forces advanced steadily northwest through the Central Pacific. Each island captured brought long-range bombers closer to Japanese home islands. Carrier task forces roamed at will through previously contested waters. The enemy was being slowly strangled. VMF 214 disbanded on January 8th as scheduled. Its pilots scattered to other units throughout the Pacific Theater. Some joined newly formed squadrons. Others returned to the United States for instructor duty. A few received medical discharges for combat fatigue and physical injuries. The Black Sheep designation passed into Marine Corps legend. Later squadrons attempted to revive the name and traditions. None matched the original unit's combat record or tactical innovation. The 84-day tour remained unique in Marine aviation history. Post-war analysis revealed the broader significance of VMF 214's achievements. Their tactics influenced fighter doctrine for decades. High-speed hit-and-run attacks became standard procedure. Formation flying emphasized mutual support rather than rigid positioning. Individual pilot initiative was encouraged within overall mission objectives. The squadron's experience also demonstrated the importance of matching aircraft performance to tactical employment. The Corsair was designed as a high-altitude interceptor. Navy doctrine tried to use it as a close support dogfighter. Marine innovation found the correct application through trial and error under combat conditions. Leadership proved equally important. Boyington's willingness to discard established procedures and experiment with new methods enabled tactical breakthroughs. His protection of subordinates from higher headquarters interference allowed creativity to flourish. Results-oriented management worked better than procedure-oriented bureaucracy. The human cost could not be ignored. Combat flying extracted a terrible price from young men barely out of their teens. Physical stress, psychological strain, constant proximity to violent death. Many veterans carried invisible wounds for decades after the shooting stopped. But their sacrifice had meaning. The 2-old squadron had helped break Japanese air power in the Central Pacific. Their tactical innovations saved countless American lives in subsequent operations. The replacement pilots had proven that experience combined with proper equipment could overcome any enemy advantage. The final scorecard showed 97 confirmed air-to-air victories in 84 days of combat operations. 203 total Japanese aircraft destroyed or damaged. 8 American pilots killed in action. 12 aircraft lost to enemy fire. The numbers spoke for themselves. VMF 214 had written its name in history through courage, innovation, and determination. The Black Sheep had proven that underdogs could become champions when led properly and equipped adequately. Their legacy would inspire Marine aviators for generations to come. The 2-old squadron had found its moment and seized it completely. Boyington walked out of Omori prison camp on August 29, 1945. He weighed 130 pounds. His normal weight was 180. Dysentery and malnutrition had carved 20 months from his frame, but he was alive when many prisoners were not. The first American soldiers he met were Marines from the 30, Amphibious Corps. They had landed at Tokyo Bay 3 days earlier. The sergeant who processed his release papers recognized the name immediately. Major Boyington? Hell, sir, we thought you were dead. The whole Corps knows about the Black Sheep. He learned about the atomic bombs during his medical examination aboard the hospital ship Benevolence. Hiroshima on August 6th, Nagasaki on August 9th. Japan had surrendered on August 15th. The war was over. He had missed the ending while sitting in a bamboo cage eating rice and fish heads. The news from the Pacific amazed him. American forces had captured Iwo Jima and Okinawa. B-29 bombers had burned every major Japanese city. The Navy had sunk what remained of the Imperial fleet. His small squadron's 84-day tour seemed insignificant against such massive operations. But the doctors who examined him disagreed. VMF 214's tactical innovations had spread throughout marine aviation. High-altitude climbing attacks were now standard doctrine. Individual initiative within loose formations had replaced rigid Navy procedures. The Corsair had become the dominant fighter in the Pacific because pilots finally understood how to use it properly. Boyington returned to the United States in September 1945 aboard the transport General Mitchell. The voyage took 18 days. He spent most of the time sleeping and eating. His body slowly recovered from 20 months of captivity. His weight climbed to 150 pounds by the time they reached San Francisco. The homecoming surprised him. Reporters waited at the pier. Photographers snapped pictures. Radio interviews filled his first week stateside. The Black Sheep had become famous while he rotted in prison. Books were being written, magazine articles published. Hollywood was interested in the movie rights. He learned the full extent of VMF 214's legacy during briefings at Marine Corps headquarters in Washington. Their tactical methods had been codified in official doctrine. Training syllabi included case studies of their operations. Flight schools taught Boyington's altitude and speed principles to every new pilot. The statistical analysis impressed him most. VMF 214 had achieved a kill ratio of 12-1 during their 84-day tour. 12 enemy aircraft destroyed for every American fighter lost. The average Marine squadron achieved 4-1 under similar conditions. The Black Sheep had tripled normal effectiveness through superior tactics and leadership. Individual pilot performance told the same story. Lieutenant John Bolt had become a double ace with victories in both World War II and Korea. Captain Robert Hansen had scored 25 kills before his death in January 1944. 8 other squadron pilots had achieved ace status with 5 or more confirmed victories. The human cost remained sobering. 14 pilots had died during the squadron's various combat tours, some in aerial combat, others in operational accidents, a few in prison camps. The replacement rate exceeded 60%. Glory came at the price of young lives cut short. Boyington received the Medal of Honor in a White House ceremony on October 5, 1945. President Truman presented the award personally. The citation read in part, "For extraordinary heroism and valiant devotion to duty as commanding officer of Marine Fighting Squadron 214 in action against enemy Japanese forces in the Central Solomons area from September 12, 1943 to January 3, 1944. The ceremony felt surreal after 20 months in captivity. Dress blue uniform with gold braid, Marine band playing, cameras flashing. He had trouble connecting this formal recognition with the desperate air battles over Bougainville. War was chaos and fear and split-second decisions. Medals were ceremony and speeches and historical perspective. But the award meant something to the Marines who had served under him. Letters arrived daily from former Black Sheep pilots scattered across the post-war world. They were attending college on the GI Bill, starting families, beginning civilian careers. The war was behind them, but the squadron bond remained strong. Boyington retired from active duty in August 1947 with the rank of colonel. He could have stayed for a full career. The Corps wanted experienced combat leaders for the post-war rebuild, but 20 months in prison had drained something from him. He needed time to heal and remember who he had been before the war. Civilian life proved difficult. He tried various businesses, sold insurance, worked in aerospace, wrote his memoirs, drank too much. The transition from combat leader to suburban businessman never felt natural. Too many nights involved bourbon and memories of dead friends. The Black Sheep legend grew without him. Television producers created a comedy series loosely based on the squadron's exploits. The show bore little resemblance to actual combat operations. Hollywood glamorized war in ways that made veterans uncomfortable. Real fighting had nothing in common with scripted entertainment, but the core story resonated with American audiences. Underdogs who proved themselves through courage and innovation. misfits who became heroes, older men who outfought younger enemies. The narrative appealed to post-war America's sense of triumph over adversity. Aviation historians began serious analysis of VMF 214's tactical contributions during the 1960s. Academic studies examined their doctrine innovations. Military colleges taught case studies of their operations. The squadron's methods influenced jet fighter tactics during the Korean and Vietnam conflicts. The Corsair itself became legendary. Air museums displayed restored examples with black sheep markings. Warbird collectors paid enormous sums for flyable aircraft. The distinctive inverted gull wing and massive radial engine symbolized American industrial might and pilot skill. Boyington died on January 11, 1988, at age 75. His funeral at Arlington National Cemetery drew hundreds of mourners. Former squadron members served as pallbearers. The Marine Band played taps as his casket was lowered into the ground, beside thousands of other warriors. The obituaries focused on his Medal of Honor and 28 aerial victories. But his real legacy lay in the tactical innovations he had pioneered: high-altitude attacks using superior speed and firepower, individual initiative within coordinated missions, matching aircraft performance to appropriate employment doctrine. These principles had saved countless American lives in subsequent conflicts. Korean war pilots used black sheep tactics against MiG-15 fighters. Vietnam veterans applied similar methods against North Vietnamese interceptors. Modern fighter doctrine still emphasized speed and altitude advantages over turning performance. The two-old squadron had proven that experience and innovation could overcome any material disadvantage. Their 84-day tour had changed the nature of aerial combat in the Pacific. Replacement pilots had become elite warriors through proper leadership and tactical brilliance. VMF 214's final scorecard remained impressive decades later. 97 confirmed air-to-air victories, 203 total Japanese aircraft destroyed or damaged, 8 pilots killed in action. The numbers represented more than statistical achievement. They measured human courage under impossible conditions. The black sheep had found their moment when the war hung in the balance. They had seized that moment completely. Their legacy would inspire warriors for generations yet unborn. The legend was complete.